Okay, hi everyone. How many of you? Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming to this. I hope that you've had a really good time so far in the conference, day 2. It's almost over. Hang in there. We'll get through it. So, my name is Femke. This is me on Twitter, if you wanted to follow me. See if this works. Okay, so today I want to talk about how to stop listening to the internet. So basically, I want to talk about how to cut through all of the bullshit that we hear online. We constantly hear people telling us what to do, what tool to learn, how to get ahead, top tips and tricks to get ahead and find success in your life. And so I want to kind of address that today and give you, or challenge you to think maybe in a new way of how you can find your own success. So this isn't going to be a code-based lecture, so leave now, by the way, in case you were hoping it was going to be. So maybe you struggle with anxiety, or perhaps you're struggling with perfectionism, or fear of failure. Maybe you are struggling with decision-making, or maybe you've got too much work, or not enough work. Maybe you don't have enough time. We've all got so much stuff we need to do. How can we find the time to do it all? Maybe you're struggling with the inability to prioritize, lack of motivation, pressure to hustle, overwhelm, finding your purpose, imposter syndrome, deadlines, fulfillment. Is this causing anyone anxiety? Because it is for me. There's so much stuff up here, and there's so much that we're told to learn. And where does all of this pressure come from? Maybe it's coming from family, or maybe it's coming from work, or from your partner or spouse, or maybe it's coming from yourself. So often we are encouraged to replicate the success of others, hoping that it will apply nicely to our own lives. But what are other people's ingredients for success isn't necessarily going to translate perfectly to our own. So whether you are a junior, a mid-level, senior, or perhaps you're a manager, we're all on our own path, right? We're all trying to reach this goal at the top of this mountain. And you might be already taking some steps to get there. Those steps might be small or they might be big. But how are you getting there? And who defined this goal for you? Was it the internet or was it yourself? And at some point along this way, on this incline to the top of your goal, you're probably going to deal with all of these feelings at some point, or at least some of them. So how can we cut through all of this noise? How can we just listen to ourselves and honor what we want? And we often underestimate the importance of listening to ourselves. So I'm going to talk about some of the common themes, and I want to share some tools from my backpack that I've kind of adopted as my own mindset to get me through all of those feelings. And maybe one or two of them will inspire you. So the first one is about hustle. Hustle is not about being a workaholic. Raise your hand if you feel pressure to hustle in your industry. A few of you? Yeah. So we're constantly hearing online from these experts in our industry or our idols to hustle. We're being told to work 24/7 and just to work for work's sake. But where is the meaning in all of this? What sacrifices are we making when we hustle? Are we sacrificing family? Are we sacrificing our own health? Our own mindset? We seem to be so fixated on the output. And hustle can mean different things for different people. I love this image, which is by Meg Draws, who is a designer at Shopify. And she put up this image earlier this year, I think, and she defined good and bad hustle. On the left-hand side, she has good hustle. And she says, good hustle is if you think a thing should exist, build it. If you don't know how to do a thing, figure it out. Did you fail? No problem. Move on to your next idea. Good hustle is being, I want to, ... Or good hustle is grabbing opportunities or you can't stop learning. And on the right-hand side, she defined bad hustle. The first one being sleepiness as a badge of honor, or health and wellness put on hold, friends and family put on hold, deadline bullies, saying that you had to do something, sacrificing your hobbies and your interests, or being busy for the sake of busy. And Dan Petty, who's quite a well-known designer, also made this tweet, where he said, "It's 1 p.m., I haven't eaten yet because I'm too busy, or I think I'm too busy." That's not cool, or entrepreneurial, or hustling. It's just plain stupid. So even the idols in our industry are feeling this way as well. And I have to question, is all of this healthy? You know, if we're working 24/7, how is that healthy for our own lives? And I used to do this. I used to think that hustle meant I had to work all of the time. And so I would get up early in the mornings, I'd work all day, I'd come home, I'd work again, I would work in the weekends. Every sort of spare moment that I could find, I would just fill it with work. It sort of turned into like a work for work's sake thing. And I realized that there wasn't much meaning or purpose in doing all of that. And it got to the point where when I tried to relax, when I sat down to catch up on a television show or browse Reddit or something like that, I would actually feel guilty. I would feel like I was getting behind because I wasn't working. You know, here I was watching TV, but all the other people are working, so they're going to be getting ahead of me. And so how do you deal with this problem? This isn't very healthy. But I do think that there is a way to embrace hustle in a healthy way. Like, if hustle is what gets you off the couch to finish that project or start that blog that's been on the back burner for a little while, then I think that that's a good thing. So here's the definition of what healthy hustle is. First of all, you need to define it for yourself. So hustle should not be defined by the Gary V's of the world, right? Everybody has their own definition and their own understanding of what hustle is. So for me, I've now adapted my hustle in a healthy way, which means I get up at 6 a.m. on weekdays and I work on my own side projects and my own things that I have going on until about 8 or 9 when I go to work. And this means that I have this block of time in my day that's totally uninterrupted, right? I can totally focus on what I want to achieve in that time frame. And so I can come home at the end of the day and not feel guilty for relaxing. This is a slide from my friend Charlie Prangley's conference talk on when she hustles. So this is a continuum of her average day. And you can see the blue bits are when she sleeps or when she works. The pink bits are when she commutes. She lives in London. And the orange bits are when she hustles. So she decided that she would hustle from about 5:30 to 7:30 in the morning, and then again in the evening, but just less intensely. So hustle can look like anything. It can be your own definition of it. Whether you want to do it in the morning or the evening, just bring it in certain small chunks and gaps and cracks in your life. Number 2 is to be inspired by hustle. So often I see people interpret other people's hustle as like this Bible, right? Like we have to follow exactly what they do. But rather than copying what these successful idols or hustlers are doing, I think that we should just be inspired by their work ethic. You know, whatever it is that gets you moving, that gets you to add more meaning to your work and to your life, that's what you should do. Just be inspired by it. And the last one is don't become a robot. So what I've often seen with people who embrace hustle as work for work's sake and they're working 24/7 is, you know, they're always working, so they spend so much time inside, probably in front of their computer, and what I see happen is they kind of like become this robot. And if we think of robots, you know, they're kind of programmed to do one thing really, really well, and that's, you know, what a hustler does. They do it really, really well. But also the thing with robots is, this is going to be debatable, is that, you know, they don't have much creativity or imagination. But we can debate that after if you want to. I can go on for an hour about that one. But let's assume for now that they don't. So these people are hustling all the time, sitting in front of their computer, and their only inspiration becomes work. So their inspiration bank then runs out. So sometimes I do say no to hustling, and I do say yes to embracing life opportunities, like going to the museum for a day, or riding my bike through the park, or having a barbecue with friends. Because to me, this is what I build my inspiration bank on. This is what inspires me. The second thing that I want to talk about is you don't have to know it all. So we're constantly being told what to do, when to do it, what to learn, right? Like Reddit is telling you to learn this thing, and Twitter is telling you to learn something else entirely. So how do we cut through all of that noise? Like as a developer, maybe you feel like you need to know Git, React, Angular, Swift, jQuery, Node, machine learning, and 100 other things that I could have put on here. And as a designer, maybe you feel like you need to know Sketch, and Framer, and InVision, and Atomic, and Figma, and Abstract, and Photoshop. And again, I could have put another 100 things on this list. Is this making anyone feel overwhelmed? My friend Joel calls this full stack anxiety, and he has a great talk on it, actually, that you all should look up and see. So maybe this list is causing you to feel overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, there are so many things on this list. How am I possibly to decide which one I should focus on, which one I should choose, which one's going to be beneficial for me in my career? Or maybe you're looking at that list and you're feeling imposter syndrome. Like you're looking at it and realizing that maybe you only know one of those things or two of them. Or maybe there were things on this list that you hadn't even heard of before. And so you're feeling like, oh, I'm behind. I'm never going to get ahead. I'm never going to be as good as the other person. Or maybe you look at this list and you're feeling confusion. There's so many things. How do I decide which one is going to be beneficial to me and which one I should invest my time into? Or maybe you look at that list and you feel burnout. And if you're feeling that way, you've probably tried all of them. So how do we keep up with all of this, right? There's so much to learn. And especially in our industry, there's so many new things always coming out all the time. You know, things are always changing. We don't know how today's technology is going to impact us tomorrow. So maybe you decide that you want to focus on learning multiple things. But then how do you decide which one to learn? Or maybe you decide that you just want to learn one thing, but then how do you decide which one thing to learn? Either way, it's a challenge. So what I do is I refer to my goals. So I think back to this mountain and I think, how can I get from A to B? How can I reach my goal? And what thing do I have to learn to help me get there? And where are the gaps in my knowledge? For example, you could think of this as climbing a mountain to the top. So here's me on the left, and I've got like a pretty steady incline to reach my goal, right? Like there's a little bit of work that I have to do, but I'm feeling confident. I know some of the things that I need to do to get to the top, and so it's a gradual incline, but it's okay. But then we've got these dips, and these are areas or plateaus where maybe I'm lacking something in my knowledge, and there's something that I need to learn so that I can keep going. So for example, let's say I want to make a video, and I don't have much video skills or experience. So I start out by going up because I know a little bit about making content, but then I don't know much about camera gear and equipment, so I go down a little bit. But I know a little bit about filming and how to press the record button, so I go up again, but I know nothing about editing, so I go back down. But I do know a little bit about content marketing and about social media, so I go up again. So there's these plateaus, right, these areas of opportunity where we've got to get down to the bottom, figure out what we need to know to keep going up. Number 2 is I ask myself what's important. I received this email from a reader, and they said, "Hey Femke, I'm overwhelmed by the vast number of tools, skill sets, and knowledge required to remain prevalent in the web industry. It can be really difficult to strike a learning balance between design and development. How can I get the most out of growing in both?" I'm sure that a lot of you have felt this way, and I still feel it too sometimes. Because this is really hard. Which one should I learn? Which one should I focus on? The more time I spend learning design, then the less time I spend learning development. So it's kind of like a seesaw. As one goes up, the other one goes down. So my advice in this situation would be to learn the one that is most valuable to you. And you can maybe it's easy to think about your future self. Where are you going? What do you want to learn? What kind of person do you want to be? And whatever tool you need to learn to get there, that's what you should focus your effort on. So once you've decided what you're going to learn, the next thing is to turn learning into a habit. So for example, when I decided I wanted to learn to code, which was this year, I decided that I would code a certain amount of times a month. So I would sit down and code. And in those sessions where I'd sit down and learn to code, I also decided that I would do it for at least an hour every time. So this eventually turned into a habit, and I kept track of my progress, which also sort of encouraged and motivated me to keep showing up. So once we've chosen what to learn, turning it into a habit can help keep that momentum going forward. Number 3 is to stop looking for your passion. So I always find this one funny because we always hear about passion as something to be found. But when you're looking for something, often it inclines that we've lost it. So did we used to have our passion and then we lost it? Did we leave it on the side of the road somewhere? I don't know, this has always confused me. So rather than stopping looking for my passion, I decided that I would just embrace it within myself. So I believe that passion is this deep calling within us that we all have, and it blossoms and it blooms over time. For some of you, it blossoms early. Maybe you already know what your passion is. Some of you, maybe not. Maybe it hasn't blossomed yet. So it all comes for us at different times. And also, too often, I see us get caught up on passion as an activity, like my passion is crochet, or my passion is bowling, or something like that. But if you think about it, bowling is not a passion, it's an activity, it's something that we do. Rather, I see passion as something that manifests itself within an activity. So for example, this is Brandon Staden, who is the founder of Humans of New York. And it originally started as a passion project where he went around New York City and took photographs of 100 people. And within taking these photographs, he also wrote a story about each person that he photographed. So he'd ask them a question, chat to them for a little while, and share these really moving stories with these beautiful photographs. That was years ago, and he now travels the world taking photos everywhere. It's quite amazing. But Brandon's passion is not photography. His passion is in storytelling. Photography is just the activity in which he uses to exert his passion. The same can be said about Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey said that his passion is to free people from concern, which he does through the activities of acting, comedy, and, as we most recently discovered, painting. So passion is something that we carry on through our life, and it can appear in multiple activities over time. But why do we care so much about passion? You know, it's as though we've been promised that passion is this thing that we need to achieve success. But you don't have to live and breathe passion every day in order to become successful. For example, I have a friend who absolutely loves horses. Like, she lives and breathes horses. She loves them. And so one day I asked her, if you love horses so much, why don't you make it your job? You know, why don't you start a horse farm or sell horse goods or do something related to horses? And it was quite funny because she said that as soon as she were to make passion her job, then she would have to rely on it to pay her bills, which would bring her feelings of stress, worry, anxiety. And so because she doesn't work with horses all day, every day, she can actually enjoy it. You know, horses bring her joy, and she doesn't have to sacrifice it for a job. So fulfilling your passion can work in multiple ways. Maybe it's something that you live and breathe every day, or maybe it's just something that you tinker in on the weekends, and that's totally fine. Number 4 is to honor your dream, not someone else's. So what is your calling? What is this big thing that you're working towards in your life? how are you going to get there? Have you thought about how you're going to get there? What sacrifices you're going to have to make? And did you decide what this dream is yourself, or did somebody else tell you what it should be? The best thing that I think we can do is to invest in ourselves and our own happiness and knowledge and craft. And if we know what our dream is, then this can become a really powerful tool when it comes to decision making, because we can answer questions with, well, will this help me get closer to my dream? So as humans, we are really good at helping other people. We want to be seen as helpful, as kind and caring and supportive and motivating, but we are really bad at helping ourselves. We often tend to neglect ourselves because, life gets in the way, whatever. We have 101 excuses, right? Maybe your inbox is overflowing. So I found myself in a situation where I was constantly honoring other people's dreams and not myself. So my inbox, I found that super important. That would give me anxiety. I've got 15 emails that I have to respond to. All of those people are waiting for me. I'm probably holding them up. They must be super important. Or that meetup that my friend invited me to, super important. I didn't want to let anyone down. But what I was doing was honoring other people's dreams and not really thinking about my own. And this caused me to feel overwhelmed, and I ended up sacrificing my own wants and my own dreams so that I could help others. But knowing your own dream is really powerful, and it can be good for making small and big decisions. But it also can be really, really hard, and we might struggle to assess the benefits. And I want to bring in this concept of should and must by Al Luna, an artist from San Francisco. Let's compare the following two statements. I should go to Laracon. I must go to Laracon. What is the difference here? Let's take a look at should. And this is what Al Luna says should means. She said, should are the expectations and obligations that we receive from others. When choosing to live our life this way, we make choices and we live for someone else other than ourselves. Perhaps you're receiving pressure from your boss or your partner, and you make should decisions in order to fulfill them. And here's what she says about must. Must, on the other hand, is about who we are and what we believe to be true. Choosing must is about honoring our own capabilities. It's about offering your unique gifts to the world and prioritizing yourself and your own dreams. So should is about fulfilling others, and must is about fulfilling yourself. Think about how many times you've said should and how many times you've said must in the last year. When I thought about this recently, I realized that I'd been saying should to far more things than I'd been saying must to. So I knew that something had to change. And so I encourage you to trust your life calling and think, where do you want to be in the future? What do you want to be doing? Where do you want to be living? Who do you want to be with? Because this can help you make powerful decisions. And knowing what your dream is means you can use should and must as a powerful lens to help identify the meaningful work in your life. And that helps us focus on what really matters. Number 5 is about making more time. So I've already told you to hustle, but in your own way. I've also told you to honor your dreams and to learn the things that you need to do. And I've also told you that you need to find your passion. So you're hearing all of this and you're thinking, well, Femke, you're telling me to do all of these things, but how am I possibly going to find the time to do them all, right? I mean, I've got to go to work and feed the cat. I've got to take the rubbish out and charge my phone. I've got to go to the supermarket and fix my car and rewatch The Office. And I've got to buy music festival tickets and buy my sister's birthday present too. And this is all one day's worth of tasks, right? So we're completely overwhelmed. We always have things that we have to do. And it's overwhelming and exhausting. And time is really precious. It's something that we fill by habit. as humans, we are really, really good at filling time. Because if we don't fill it, then we're wasting it, right? And none of us want to be seen as someone that wastes time. But when was the last time you did nothing? You just sat there being. I've got some bad news for you, which is that you're never going to have more time. We all have the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce, and so even fame and fortune cannot buy you more, trust me. But there is one thing that we can do, which is that we can learn how to prioritize it, and it starts by saying no. I was talking to my mum about this talk, and we were talking about how to make more time, and she said this to me. She said, saying I don't have time is bullshit, unless you're not breathing anymore, which I absolutely love. So let's imagine that you've got two jars. You've got a jar of yes and no. And in your yes jar, it's pretty full, right? We like to say yes, we like to please people, and so we've got quite a lot of things going on in there. They're different sizes, so the small things might be small things or small opportunities that you've said yes to, and the bigger ones might be, more important or life-changing things, like saying yes to a new job. And we've also got a jar full of no's. And there's not as many things in the no jar because we don't like to say no, right? We don't want to come off as rude. We don't want to rock the boat or burn a bridge. We want to impress people and help them out. And so we don't say no very often, and so the jar is pretty empty. But what happens if we swap this around? What happens if we start saying no to more things? Of course, our no jar becomes fuller, meaning there's more space left in our yes jar to say yes to bigger opportunities. So looking at it this way means that we've got more space to say yes to meaningful things. And we've only got so many yeses that we can offer in our lives because we all have limited time. So don't waste them on bad opportunities. So you go from this to this. I love this quote by Greg McKeown, and he said, "Only once you give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all can you make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter." But this is hard, right? Because naturally we see everything as an opportunity. How do we know if this is the opportunity we should say yes to? And how do we decide? The only way to decide is to forecast and to think bigger. So what is the next big thing that you want to do, and how are you going to get there? What things should you say no to enable you to say yes to the next big thing that comes along? And there's two ways that we can use our time. The first way is that we can spend it. So we can do things like email, we can do chores, we can browse Reddit, or we can invest it. We can invest it on things like going to a conference, learning something new, refining our craft and our skills. Which one of these two things gets most of your yeses? Is it the things that you spend your time on, or the things that you invest your time on? What happens when you've made the time and you sit down to finally do the thing you want to do, but you find yourself not honoring it? Maybe you're a procrastinator. Maybe you welcome distraction and avoid your tasks. Or maybe you're the procrastinator, which is me. And that's a term coined by Jessica Heish, who's a well-known lettering artist. And she says that procrastinating is the work you do while putting off doing the real work. So whichever one of this you are, they both can be combated with positive triggers. So what is a positive trigger? Let's imagine that you've decided that you're going to run a marathon, and you've set yourself a strict training schedule. So you want to get up at 5:30 in the morning every day and run and train for your marathon. But maybe you find yourself getting distracted or procrastinating, like, oh, just another press on the snooze button, or, oh, maybe I'll get something to eat, or I don't feel like it, or I'll browse Twitter instead. So what you could do is the night before you want to go running, put your clothes and your running shoes right next to your bed. so that when you get up, you see your clothes and your running shoes, and that triggers you to put them on and to go running and get out the door. Another example is perhaps leaving your phone in the living room when you go to bed to encourage you to read on your Kindle instead. Or maybe you could do what my friend Sam does. And I got this Instagram story from him just over the weekend. And on the left it says, "Another Sunday, another talk." And then in the middle it says, "Sam, how do you get so much done?" they ask. And then on the end, he says, "I fucking turn it off and get started." Which I think is an awesome attitude to have. So we need to find focus in the time that we've made. We need to work smarter, more productively, because this helps lead towards achievement and fulfillment. Number 6 is to not be paralyzed by fear. So you've made all this time and you're ready to get to work, but you find yourself frozen in fear. Like, what do I do? How do I get started? You're completely paralyzed. There is so much pressure on us to be perfect. And fear is something that's selfish, right? It keeps us in our comfort zone. Here we are trying to navigate away from it, but it keeps pulling us back in because it's so safe and warm and cozy. But I think that it's okay to do the things that you suck at. It's okay to be a noob. It's okay to embrace risk and take on new challenges. Because as we embrace fear, it gets smaller and our confidence goes bigger. As children, we are encouraged to fail every day. So, for example, when you were learning to walk, you'd get up, take a couple of steps, and fall down, and your parents would be ecstatic. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you just took 2 steps, that's amazing." Would be congratulated. Who cares that you fell down? You actually made 2 steps. And you'd get up and you'd do it again and again, each time, learning from the past time, learning from the time that you fell down so that you can walk more and more. So why is it okay for children to fail but not for adults? But fear is not just about failing. Maybe you're afraid of success. Or maybe you're afraid of joy or happiness. And maybe you are afraid of those things because of the consequences that they bring, or maybe you feel like you don't deserve them. And I love this quote by Elizabeth Gilbert. She says, "Here's how I learned to deal with fear. I made a decision a long time ago that if I want creativity in my life, then I'll have to make space for fear too. Creativity is a path for the brave, yes, but it is not a path for the fearless. And it's important to recognize the distinction between the two. Bravery means doing something scary." So fear means something different for each of us. Maybe it means doing a conference talk or asking for feedback. Or maybe it's something totally personal, like getting married. That can be a really scary thing. My definition of fear is that I challenged myself to stop making excuses. 2 years ago, a friend and I decided that we wanted to start a podcast. But I was so afraid. I had fear about what would people think, what would people say, what if I embarrassed myself or said something really stupid, what if nobody listened to it, what if the audio was really crappy quality, and I had all of these fears. But, she encouraged me to do a couple of practice episodes, but then we never put it out. And I realized that I was just making excuses, and I was just afraid. So one day we decided to do it for real. We published it. That was back in November 2015. We're still doing it today, and it's had 250,000 listens, which to me is crazy. Failure and success should also be defined by you. So I have this story of 2 friends who wanted to learn knitting. And one friend decided that her definition of success when it comes to knitting was to make baby shoes. In New Zealand, by the way, we call these baby booties, but I was afraid that if I would say that, people would have no idea what I was saying. So let's call them baby shoes. So she wanted to make these baby shoes. That was her definition of success. So she started to learn knitting, and she was really struggling. And it makes sense to me because I don't know about you, but if I look at those, that looks pretty advanced to me as like a beginner knitting project. So she tried, and then she realized it was too difficult. She stopped. The other friend decided that her definition of knitting success was to make a square, which is so much easier. And, what do you know? She actually kept it up, she made her square, and then she kept going. So failure and success can mean different things for different people. And it's okay to set these lofty goals, and you might fail, but it's okay, because we should celebrate the small wins, right? We've learned something and we can move on and use it for next time to be better. But it's also important to know when to quit, and I feel like this is something that we don't talk about enough. Maybe it's time to quit something if it's no longer working, or maybe you've had repeat failure in it, or maybe you've lost your passion or you're interested in it and it's just not going well. Then in this case, we should acknowledge it and quit. And Eric Barker said, if you quit the things that aren't working for you, you free up time for the things that might. We're bombarded by stories of persistence leading to success, but we don't hear much about the benefits of quitting. No one wants to be the skydiver who pulled the ripcord too late, right? That just sounds terrible. So the point of this is just to keep moving, but also to identify when maybe it's time to stop and course correct. And you'll know pretty quickly if you made the wrong decision and maybe you should have kept going. But that's okay, because we're all on our own journey, and you can just adjust it and keep going. No one's going to give you shame for that. The last thing I want to talk about is embracing shitty work. Raise your hand if you have made shit work before. Maybe you wrote some really shitty code or you drew a really terrible thing. Okay, so like almost everyone. Okay, keep your hand raised if despite making this shitty work, you published it, or you launched it, you shipped it. Okay, a lot of you. Awesome. When I ask this question to designers, mostly all the hands go down. So we seem to keep our shitty work to ourselves a lot of the time. But the thing is, we all make shitty work. Even our idols do. We see them putting out this perfect work, but we fail to remember that for every one good idea, there is a million shit ones. They probably went through hundreds of iterations before they got to that actual perfect final idea. But we tend to keep these ideas and this process behind closed doors because we're afraid of being judged or criticized, or we think that if we were to publish it, it would be a bad reflection of our work or our skills. And so either we iterate in the dark or we just do nothing at all. And this can lead to paralysis, right? I've seen young designers who are so afraid of this pressure to create perfect work that they just do nothing at all. And I've also seen seasoned designers who also feel all of this pressure, and so therefore they keep it all to themselves. They don't publish their work anymore because they're afraid of this overwhelming pressure. They're completely paralyzed. Perfectionism stops people from creating their work, yes, but even worse, it often stops people from beginning. Perfectionists often decide in advance that the end product is never going to be satisfactory, and so they don't even bother trying to create in the first place, which breaks my heart. So we're all paralyzed by this idea of perfectionism, but where did it come from? It suddenly became this prerequisite that all work online had to be perfect. And we've seen this with the dribblization of design and the pressure to create perfect GitHub streaks. But to me, this is also boring. It's also lifeless. None of this leads to perfect work. The problems with perfect work are first that we lose sight of the process. So there's always pressure on the result, on the outcome, that we can't focus on the beginning. So we miss out on the important founding parts in the start of the process and just jump towards the end, which robs us of the opportunity to play and explore. We stick with what we know and we stay within our comfort zone. The other problem with perfect work is that we sacrifice creative freedom. When was the last time you created just for the sake of it? And how did that make you feel? Was it scary? Was it exhilarating? Was it uncomfortable? Either way, the ability to create something without a goal, I think, is magical, because that unleashes new opportunities. And so I think we need to embrace shitty work and embrace this imperfectionism, because there's so much that we can learn from it. So I want you to give yourself permission to be shit, because that's where the magic happens. I was once at a workshop run by Ladies at UX here in Amsterdam, and it was a drawing workshop, so they taught us new techniques on how to draw. And we drew really shit stuff. Like, we started by drawing circles and squiggly lines, and then we moved on to triangles and squares and all these other shapes. And had we just skipped this part of the process and just jumped straight to the end to creating perfect work, I would have missed out on learning all of these new drawing techniques. You know, I found this really valuable. Like, believe it or not, drawing these circles to me was enlightening. And so I think play is really valuable, and there's so much that we can learn from that. And so I'd really encourage you all to continue playing. And Ladies at UX created this safe space at the workshop, but you could also create that safe space for yourself at home. So ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want? Not what do others want from me or for me, or what others are telling me to do. And once you know what you want, how are you going to get there? And how are you going to balance all of those feelings that I showed at the start of this talk? I encourage you all to listen to yourself honestly and to your authentic true self and what you want. Stop neglecting your own voice and just focus on you, on where you want to go, so that you can live the rest of your career in a healthy way and find more fulfillment in your life. Thanks.